Hello and welcome to the Herald-Tribune SNN Conversations with the Candidates. I'm Tom Tryon, opinion editor of the Herald-Tribune, and with me are Paul Caragiulo and Shannon Snyder, candidates for Sarasota County Commission District 2. Now they're running in the Republican primary, and the winner will face other candidates in the general election. Absentee ballots will go out July 22, and the primary ends on August 26. Candidates for this four-year office must live in their district, but voting is county-wide. Now please note, the Herald-Tribune and SNN will provide more coverage of this race as the election draws near. And more information will be available in an online voter guide at heraldtribune.com. So now to the questions, and I'll first note that there is no incumbent in this race, so the winner will take office. So let's start with the two of you. Paul and Shannon, you both are sitting Sarasota City Commissioners. Why are you running for County Commission instead of another term on the City Commission? We'll start with Paul.
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to do this. I would say that I really enjoy serving the community, and when the opportunity presented itself, I was very excited about perhaps representing a larger portion of the community, in this case, the entire county. I'm looking forward to some of the challenges that go with representing a much larger constituency, and I feel that I'm equipped to do so.
All right. Shannon, your turn.
Yeah, I was sitting on the sidelines and got into it when I saw the county ethics officer basically escorted from the building, and that's when I decided I thought I should step up and offer myself as an alternative to status quo.
Okay. So tell me, Shannon, we'll start with you. What decision did you make? What one decision did you make as a city commissioner that best reflects your approach to governance?
I'm basically trying to bring the business community and the neighborhoods together. I think that was formulated by going to the design code, the form-based design, and actually getting administrative review, even extended into the starting process, moving it into the neighborhood so that we can have surety and development.
Okay. Paul?
Well, as a person who comes from the business background, I've been constantly advocating for economic development, but more specifically because transparency is so important. I'm very proud of my effort to transfer the IT department over to the city clerk's office, where it can offer precisely that, more transparency.
All right, and that was information technology, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You're both running in the GOP primary. So what Republican principles would guide your decision-making on the county commission? We'll start with you, Paul.
Well, I think first and foremost, being a fiscal conservative is the most important thing, and really the thing of primary relevance to local government. I think that strong fiscal management principles that we have in the private sector, where people are accountable for things. Also, that government really should try to facilitate to the extent that it can, economic development and not obstruct the economic development.
Okay. Shannon?
Yeah, I think my principles on taxes to start off with. I've never raised the millage rate, and I've never raised business fees, voted for any of that. I've also been a strong proponent of having development come in and infill, and making sure that we're trying to offer an alternative to greenfield development. So I think the infill is different than going east.
Okay. Speaking of land use planning, as we all know, Sarasota 2050 is one of the county's long-range planning instruments. Rather than go through a whole scenario of all that's in that plan, let's start with Shannon. And Shannon, please tell me if there's one part of the plan that you think is most important to retain or to get rid of, what would that be?
Fiscal neutrality.
Okay, tell us why.
If we're going to have new development, we're going to have new infrastructure costs, new government costs, and those costs need to pay their way. I think that was a good form that was originally put into it, and I think that there have been concerted efforts to negate that effort and reverse the trend of actually having development pay for itself.
All right, just real quickly, did you believe that the original fiscal neutrality requirements were fair, achievable?
I think they were somewhat achievable. Nothing's ever perfect, but I think they were achievable.
Sure.
And I think they were somewhat basically gutted in this last session.
Okay, Paul?
I think there's no question that impact fees and fiscal neutrality need to be a part of the comprehensive plan. But more specifically, one of the things that I would like to see augmented is the preservation of the open space and the greenways. One of the tremendous assets this community has is the amount of public conservation space that we have. It's wonderful. We have beaches, and we have things like Mayaca State Park, and these are tremendous assets to our community, and they need to be preserved first and foremost.
Okay, thanks. Paul, we'll start with you. Do you support a proposed Come As You Are shelter for chronically homeless adults? So that'll be a yes or no. And then if you would, if you do support it, talk a little bit about location, what kind of a criteria you would use or where you would envision it.
I am in support of a Come As You Are facility. However, that's going to have to come with some parameters to it. And in this case, it's very easy to get sort of fixated on the actual facility, but it's probably equally, maybe so more important for us to execute some of the remainder of the strategies in that plan that stop the enabling and start the engaging. Just about every component of that plan is just as important as the next. I think that I haven't lost faith that we will come up with a site that works, but we have to work towards it.
Okay, Shannon?
Yeah, I support that we need a jail diversion program. 20% of the jail population is our chronic homeless, but I think it needs to be law enforcement required. I think that when the taxpayers realize that you're going to open up a facility for anybody to wander in and out of town, and that's what we're finding with the city, with our own case managers, most of the folks are less than here in 120 days. So they're coming from somewhere else. So our problem may not actually be our problem. It may just be passing through. We actually may have a bit of a tourist problem, for lack of a better term of it, but they need to be reconciled back with their families up north rather than taking on our burden.
Okay, so do you both agree, I'll assume you both agree, but tell me if you're wrong, that having city ordinances, so-called quality of life ordinances, you can't panhandle, you can't be doing certain things that we won't talk about on the air, in public places, that having a shelter is necessary to enforcing those ordinances? Just really quickly,
I think
is that your agreement?
Yes, I think that the law demonstrates that in order to have a certain level of efficacy within those ordinances, that it's very likely a requirement needs to be, or a facility needs to be in place for them to have teeth, per
Right.
se.
Shannon, you agree?
I think there's definitely a need for a jail diversion program to make sure that these folks, instead of putting into the regular judicial system, that we offer them an opportunity to get their life back and let them have that opportunity before any type of judicial process is put upon them.
Okay, just real quickly, do you both agree that I think a lot of people don't, one, understand that connection, and two, I think a lot of people seem to be thinking of this as just as a shelter with no rehab, no training, no anything. Is that your perception?
The model that's being suggested, which is precisely a jail diversion program, that's exactly what it is. I think to sort of put this out there as just another place where people can spend their time, that's not the case. This is a portal that absorbs the services in a concentrated area so that we can direct these folks, whether it's in this community or perhaps even outside the community, we can get them the help that they need, or at least make them more receptive to getting help.
Not to be repetitive, Shannon, you were a former law enforcement officer. Would you have liked to have had a facility like this when you were on patrol?
Listen, I visited the one in Pinellas County. If it's strictly for the law enforcement as a diversion for jail, I'm all in favor of that. I think that where we run into the problem is just allowing people to come and go, and that is where the real problem comes in, as how much enabling are we really going to do? If we're going to do this rather than a jail diversion program, rather than the judicial system, we need to make sure that that's an accountability process that needs to be put forward. And I haven't quite seen all that yet as far as how the parameters are going to work on it. So.
Okay. All right, let's shift gears literally and talk a little bit about transportation. Start with you, Shannon. Should the county commission have done anything differently in planning and permitting the mall at Interstate 75 and University Parkway? And if you could be specific, help me out here.
I sit as a vice chair of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and I can tell you that we make decisions on road projects, but we don't make decisions on land use projects. The infrastructure for that mall should have been in place prior to the mall being opened. It's not. We're going to be going to a diverging diamond at some point. I think that will be successful. The one in Georgia has been very successful. It's in a similar area.
On the interstate?
Yes, and I think that once the public gets used to that, it'll be working out. But the infrastructure should, but it's going to be almost 20 years before we fully work out the traffic problems that are going to be created.
All right, Paul?
Well, I believe that some of these issues are precisely because of the way that maybe 2050 has been administered, for one thing. There is a relationship between the two things. However, back into that particular project, we can look at changing the standards all day long, and we probably should if the public doesn't have the confidence in it. But the point is whether at that time, whether that project met the concurrency requirements or it didn't, and in this case it did. So if we're not happy, we need to change those standards so that the public has more confidence.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the priorities you would focus on if you're elected. Start with Paul. What one or two issues would you really try to home in on?
I come from a small business background, and although we get absorbed in land use and all types of things that have to do with architects and attorneys and engineers, the story of small business in this community is the story of business in this community is the story of small business the same way it is everywhere. And I would advocate to make things understandable and actionable for the small business person. Not everyone has the wherewithal or the resources to lug lawyers and everyone else in to try to get things done. There's an awful lot of folks operating in a mom and pop capacity who need to work through the system. And I'm very sensitive to that, and I want to advocate and try to work hard to remove some of those barriers.
Okay, Shannon?
Yeah, my main focus is going to be infrastructure. We already know that our road maintenance, just the repaving of what we already have, is starting to fall behind. I think if anybody drives on Jacaranda Boulevard down south, they run into the potholes on a regular basis. I think we're running behind in that aspect, and we need to make sure that we watch the budget and are able to make sure what we already have is maintained at a high level. I think that's what our citizens expect.
Okay, you mentioned South County, so I'll pose kind of a South County question to you. You're both, city of Sarasota residents. You've spent most of your time. What are you doing to try to familiarize yourself with the issues down south? Shannon?
Well, I spent 25 years in the sheriff's office, and having worked South County and every area of South County, from the times in Inglewood through all the fires and the floods, and I've actually been on River Road when it's been part of the river, taking care of that. I'm very familiar with South County and very sensitive to the concerns of equity coming out of South County to make sure that that's there. So I'm very familiar with it.
Okay, great. Paul?
My time in South County has been predominantly listening. I think your job as a public official is to first and foremost listen. We are elected by a district, we represent a district, we are elected by the entire county. And what I'm looking forward to is working directly at some of the specific challenges that face the South County, and perhaps to do what I could do to remediate some of the perception that there's a lack of equity, a lack of fairness about what South County receives or doesn't receive, and perhaps what North County does. We're in one county, it's one community, it needs to be treated equally.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to give you both up to 45 seconds for a closing statement. So we'll start with you, Shannon.
I'm Shannon Snyder. I've been born and raised in Sarasota County and want to be your next county commissioner. I was elected to the City Commission after 25 years in local law enforcement. I've served a number of years on the City Planning Board, and I also was part of the Downtown Master Plan during the Duane Plan and was part-time chairman of the Planning Board then. I have served as vice chair of the Metropolitan Planning Organization that helps decide some of our transportation needs and issues, and I would really like and appreciate your vote.
All right, thank you. Paul?
I am fairly new to government. I'm a private sector person. I know what it's like to not only sign the back of a paycheck, but actually sign the front. I bring strong fiscal practices that are results driven. I enjoy representing constituents. I take the job very, very seriously. Don't take my word for it. You can go to my website and check out the folks who are supporting me. I believe that these folks are supporting me because they know the way that I operate, take it very seriously. And government is a collaborative process. You have to develop relationships with folks you work with. You have to and establish relationships with your constituents and those you're representing. Please give me the opportunity to work with you by working for you.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. We're out of time. Thanks for coming in tonight. Thanks to my crew at SNN. We'll be right back in a moment with candidates for Sarasota County Commission District 4. Thanks again.
Thank you.